11 a.m., May 27th, 1997. The AC is blasting on high as you open your eyes and look around your room. It's your first week of summer vacation. You waste no time getting up and walking out into the living room. The news is on. You hear the weatherman talk about the threat for thunderstorms later in the afternoon. A risk for a few tornadoes is mentioned, but you don't think anything of it. After all, this is Texas in the spring. Tornadoes are an everyday thing. A few seconds later, you're out the door. You look up at the sky. It's blue. Only a few fluffy clouds can be seen. Well, you don't know it yet. Despite the sky's calm and tranquil appearance, the birth of a monster is slowly taking place above. CAPE, or the potential energy within the atmosphere that storms can use to fire, is astronomically high, with CAPE values estimated to be around 6,500 joules per kilogram as the morning turns into the afternoon. Mid-level lapse rates, or the change in temperature observed with height, were similarly quite high, indicating that any thunderstorms that would fire later on in the day would likely be able to grow quite quickly. Moisture content across the region was very impressive as well. As you ride your bike down the streets of Jarrell, you'd notice this, the air having that undeniable mugginess to it, a faint haze lingering in the air. While all of these conditions were coming together to create the potential for a significant tornado outbreak, one major ingredient was lacking: wind shear. However, deep layer bulk shear, which measures the vector difference between the winds at about 20,000 feet to near the surface, was approaching 40 knots, which, combined with the extreme thermodynamics that day, was enough to support supercellular thunderstorms. A gravity wave left behind by overnight storms in the Arklatex region was just beginning to propagate through central Texas as the afternoon arrived. This gravity wave would interact with the cold front and mezzolow draped around the Austin area, creating enough lift to get storms to initiate. Riding through town, admiring the way the sun shines through the emerald leaves, enjoying ice cream with your friends. To you, it's just like any other day in Jarrell. You look back up at the sky, billowing anvils rising mightily in the distance. It's not foreboding. You've seen that sight 1,000 times before. As the day moves on at a snail's pace, so too do the storms forming in the distance. Nearly non-existent lower-level winds lead to slow forward motion as the billowing anvils to the north turn into full-blown supercells. Interestingly, these budding storms are moving to the southwest as opposed to the typical northeast motion observed across the U.S. One supercell in particular would begin to blossom at a rapid pace, soon gaining severe thunderstorm status as hail is observed not far from the city of Waco. Slowly but surely, this storm is making its way down I-35, its eyes set directly on Jarrell. It's quiet. Almost too quiet. The sound of the birds chirping in the trees, the rumble of your tires against the concrete sidewalk. Nothing else. Miles away, the supercell moving in your direction is in the process of producing its first tornado. The storm's mesocyclone would rapidly intensify, a significant F2 tornado soon touching down just outside of the Lorena city limits. This twister would uproot several trees and destroy a mobile home before lifting as its parent circulation would begin to recycle. Meteorologists at the National Weather Service would estimate the storm's forward motion at this time to be roughly 5 miles per hour, barely moving along at all. As such, the cell's subsequent tornado, the brief F0, would essentially be stationary as it tore through open farmland near Bruceville Eddy. The day's first intense tornado would touch down a few minutes later, the supercell having once again quickly recycled. This time, it would drop an F3 twister in extreme southwestern McLennan County, the twister tossing a car and pickup truck several hundred feet, and destroying a residence and farm building during its 20-minute life cycle. KCEN-TV, whose station was located only a few miles away from the twister's path, would catch the tornado live on their station's Skycam.
just west of Interstate 35, and it's moving almost due south. So a person's in Troy. If you live between Eddy and Troy, take cover immediately. If you're in a mobile home, get out. Find a safe place. If you don't find a safe place and the tornado's right at your house, the best thing to do is go ahead and find a ditch and lie flat in a ditch and let this thing pass. Most people are killed. Look at the debris circling around this tornado. Look at it. Man, it's a big one. Huge tornado. It's very close to the station. It's within a mile of us, I believe. You can see there's some houses here. It's on the ground, moving out.
A few minutes later, yet another F3 tornado would touch down. This one proving to be even more destructive than the last, capsizing dozens of boats along the shores of Lake Belton and destroying more than a dozen homes. In Jarrell, things are still peaceful, but an eerie darkness is visible in the distance. You can hear the rumble of thunder as you traverse the outskirts of town. The air smells like rain. Quickly, you begin to rush back home, just as a gentle breeze begins to flood in from the north. Just a few miles away, a violent mesocyclone is spinning rapidly. From high up in the clouds, a thin, spindly funnel cloud would descend to the ground, initially only a few feet wide as it tears through the rural Texas countryside. It tosses hay bales thousands of feet into the air and shreds trees like they're nothing. The tornado lifts, then comes back down, hopping along the ground as if teasing the hundreds of onlookers who pull over on the side of I-35 to watch it, just waiting to see what it becomes. Finally, the twister makes up its mind. As if on cue, just as it turns directly towards Jarrell, the tornado begins to turn violent. Rapidly, it expands in size, soon shedding the thin rope-like appearance it had donned before, and instead taking on a fearsome, terrifying, multi-vortex state. Multiple funnels rotating around the circulation at lightning-fast speeds, each sucking up whatever unfortunate bushes and trees lay in its path. It's at this moment when you see it. Just as you enter the Double Creek Estates, you turn around, and see the twister as it slowly marches towards you. A dead man, walking straight into Jarrell. You rush into your house, throwing the door open and running for shelter. You have no basement. Barely anyone does in the Double Creek Estates. You're frantic, grabbing things to use as a shield before you look out the window, a massive, nearly mile-wide wall of darkness inching its way closer and closer to your house. The tornado slows down just as it enters the subdivision. At 3/4 of a mile wide, the wedge tornado parks itself right over the area, tearing up grass, dirt, asphalt, and everything in between, like an incomprehensible eldritch horror. Home alone, you have no choice but to duck down into the bathtub. The tornado's roar gets louder by the second. The ground beneath you shakes as it inches closer, second by second, moment by moment, waiting for the moment the darkness consumes it. You feel pieces of wood and metal pellet your body. 200-plus mile-per-hour winds lash at everything in sight as the world comes crashing down around you. The house is torn apart, piece by piece, brick by brick, but you can't bear to look up and watch. You grip onto the tub with all your might, barely managing to keep yourself glued to the ceramic tiles below you, your ears popping and your eardrums aching as the sound of 1 million freight trains consumes your existence. And then, it happens. You lose your grip. You feel the twister's winds come up beneath you, your hands slipping as you scrape and scratch at the tub floor until you're lofted into the air. Like a bird in the wind, you feel yourself flying. Your vision is blinded by dust and the pieces of the neighborhood you grew up in. Your heart beats faster and faster and faster as you soar through the sky at breakneck speed until you hit the ground. Your heartbeat comes to a stop. You take your last few breaths, your brain filled with visions from the end of reality, until you wake up. Debris falls from the sky, the smell of shredded grass. Pain radiates throughout your body. The taste of mud fills your mouth. It's hard to open your eyes, but you manage. Off in the distance, the tornado rages on, a shadow of its former self. It's now once again just a spindly rope as it meanders through the forests outside of Jarrell. And then, just like that, it lifts, putting an end to a short yet intense 5-mile path of destruction. As you lift yourself up, battling against the pain, you can see what was once your neighborhood. The tornado had parked itself over the subdivision for several minutes, and that showed in the damage it left behind. Most of the subdivision was reduced to bare slabs, the wood, bricks, and other materials that formerly made up the houses in the area reduced to nothing but a fine powder, some of the most extreme debris granulation ever documented. In some areas, not even the plumbing remained, pipes ripped up and out of the ground where some houses once stood. In most of the subdivision, it's impossible to tell that a home ever stood on the numerous empty slabs of concrete. No significant debris visible anywhere nearby, just fine grains of wood, brick, and stone. Not even the grass was spared. The top layer of soil ripped up and out of the ground throughout much of the Double Creek estates. Ground scouring as deep as 18 inches would be observed in the fields around the homes, exposing the bedrock in some areas. Every car in the neighborhood would be obliterated, many thrown hundreds of yards away, torn apart into numerous pieces and caked with mud. Many vehicles were never recovered, believed to have been torn apart into small pieces and scattered in the surrounding fields. All trees in the Double Creek estates would be completely debarked. One smaller tree was even documented to have been pierced by an electrical cord. Within minutes, first responders would descend upon the subdivision. You'd find yourself being lifted onto a gurney, one of the lucky ones you'd be told. Many of the people who rode the tornado out in the Double Creek estates were left unrecognizable, medical examiners being forced to use dental records to identify them. Reportedly, the bodies of victims were in many cases so disfigured that first responders had trouble differentiating them from the remains of the over 300 cattle who were grazing in the fields nearby, many of the latter being skinned by the twister's winds and thrown 1/4 of a mile away. In total, 27 lives would be taken by the tornado. None of them did anything wrong. All of them did what they were always told to do. They sought shelter in the most interior room in their homes, far away from windows and exterior walls. But the Jarrell tornado wasn't any ordinary twister. Without access to a basement, something most everyone in the Double Creek estates lacked, chances of survival were near zero. The few that did survive escaped with significant injuries, many of them being lucky enough to avoid the tornado's violent center.
I think the people out there probably took the best shelter available. I think they ran to an interior closet, an interior room, a hallway. They shut all the doors to the hallway. Folks, if you've seen what's left of those houses out there, it wouldn't matter.
It's my first tornado. Hope it's my last.
I've never seen anything as devastating as that.
I expected to find something, and we didn't find anything, except for just wreckage and bodies.
I didn't even bother to take any pulses because they were gone. There was nothing anyone could do for me.
She was a mom holding on to her. They were just holding each other. And they died that way.
I'm going to have myself a good one. I'm going to have a good cry and get it over with and out of my system. But that we're on with life again.
Authorities won't let him in to see what, if anything, is left.
Some of my customers think I'm dead. They don't even know I even exist. I'm not wiped out. I'm alive.
Stephanie Peterson lost everything to the tornado.
They're telling everyone, oh, they're doing this for us and they're doing that for us, and they aren't doing anything.
Other than being banged up, Virginia Davidson is also one of the lucky ones. In the flattened subdivision, there's nothing left of her house. The twister picked it up with her in the bathtub.
I saw my neighbors right next to me outside looking at it, and we could all see it coming. And then I went inside and I never saw them again. They didn't make it.
Among the dead were 3 entire families. the Igos, the Smiths, and the Moorings. John and Paul Igo were identical twins. People said it was always hard to tell them apart. They weren't only identical in looks, but in many ways their actions too. Both of them sang in the choir, played basketball and football, and ran track. They had just finished their freshman year at Jarrell High School when the twister took their lives. Their sister Audrey was just as active in the community as they were. She was a musician and was practicing to become the pianist for the church the family attended. She would have been a high school senior the next year. Joan and Larry were the heads of the family. A fearsome father and mother duo, they cared for their children with loving hearts, and were always there for the town they lived in. Joan worked as a teacher, and was a constant within church and community events within Jarrell. Larry was a deacon, a Sunday school teacher, a music leader, and one of the most respected people in town. Nearly 1,000 people attended the family's funeral, over 2 times the population of Jarrell at the time the tornado struck. Their home did not have a tornado shelter. In Georgetown, a city not far from Jarrell, you can find Odd Fellows Cemetery. It's here where the Igo family was buried. Just a few rows down from the Igos, you can find the graves of the Smith family. Here, Cindy Smith and her 2 daughters, Brandy and Stacy, are laid to rest. Brandy and Stacy were just 13 and 10, respectively, when the twister cut their lives short. The family's shared gravestone reads, "A loving mother and her 2 daughters, taken together to a higher place during the tornado in Jarrell. Their lives have passed from our sight, but never from our hearts." They, too, did not have a tornado shelter. Just a short ways away within the cemetery is the Mooring family. Led by a strong, caring father, Keith, who is remembered as an avid fisherman by friends and family, and his beloved wife, Cynthia, a loving mother who dedicated her entire life to caring for her 2 sons, Eric and Ryan, who were in high school when the twister struck. Like the Smiths and Igos, their home lacked any below-ground shelter. The Carmonas were a family of 4. On May 27, 1997, 3 of them were home. Ruth Carmona and her 2 children, Satine and Michael Jr. The 3 of them sheltered in their house when the twister struck, and lost their lives in its intense winds. A few hours later, Michael Sr., the family patriarch, arrived home from work. What he saw when he pulled into his driveway was a muddy lot surrounding a bare concrete slab. His wife and children scattered about the fields surrounding town. The Lafrance family lived a few houses down from the Carmonas. Debbie, the mother, was at home with her husband Buddy and daughter Kristen. Kristen was 9 years old at the time, and remembers her mother and father huddled around the window, their voices low and concerned. She ran to them and squeezed herself between the 2 to get a good look outside, only to see in the distance a thin, spindly funnel dancing along the countryside outside of Jarrell. Her mother and father got everyone into the bathroom. Debbie and Kristen sat in the bathtub together. It wasn't big enough for Buddy to get in with them. Just like what you experience as the tornado approached the estates, Kristen recalls feeling the shaking of the ground and the increasing roar of the tornado as it got closer and closer until finally it struck. The walls of the home came crashing down, and she remembers feeling the winds push her body down to the ground as she was blasted by mud and dirt. She remembers her mouth being filled with mud, trying to spit it out, and her dad trying his best to hold his wife and child down as the tornado roared past. The last thing she remembers her father saying before she lost consciousness was, "Hold on tight." That was the last time she ever saw or heard her father alive again. Kristen awoke several minutes later in her front yard, bloodied, muddy cuts all over her body. She could only lift her left arm and her head. She looked up at her home. Nothing remained of it. Even the bathtub she had hidden was gone, disintegrated. They'd never find any pieces of it. And then she heard it. A scream. Her mother was buried beneath a peach tree in the backyard, her jaw broken, screaming in agony. Kristen began calling for help, all while frantically looking for her father. He was nowhere to be seen. After a few minutes, first responders began to arrive. Kristen and her mother were rescued and taken to the hospital. Her father's body was recovered a few hours later. He hadn't survived the storm. A loving father and husband, he died a hero. One of the hardest things about researching videos like this one is going through the obituaries of the victims and seeing the messages left behind on these pages by the loved ones of the deceased. While looking at Buddy Lafrance's, I was blown away by just how many of these messages were left. By his wife, his friends, even his granddaughter, who was born years after his death. Seeing all of these messages shows just how loved he was by those around him, and just how much he's missed on an everyday basis. The Ruiz family resided in a mobile home on the edge of the Double Creek Estates. Brothers John and Michael Ruiz fled the mobile home as the twister approached, running to their neighbor's house for more substantial shelter, just as they'd been told to do since they were little. Their neighbors were the Mooring family. The Ruiz brothers perished right alongside the 4 members of the Mooring family. Maria Ruiz, their mother, urgently rushed home to be with her sons right as the twister engulfed the Double Creek Estates. She was only a few blocks away when the tornado consumed her car, throwing her hundreds of feet off the road, killing her. In an ironic twist, the Ruiz family mobile home sat just a few rows down from the Mooring residence, completely untouched. The brothers would have survived if they had stayed home. Among the others who lost their lives were the Gowers, Bernice and Brian, Emma Mullins, Vicky Taylor, Jonathan Kell, Frederick Ripley, Catherine Meyer, and the youngest victim, 5-year-old Ryan Fillmore, all of whom lacked underground shelters. The above-ground survival rate in the Double Creek Estates neighborhood was near 0. Among the lucky ones to have a storm shelter was the Hernandez family. They lived near the moorings. All 6 of them huddled in their cellar as the tornado struck, and lived. They, like you, were among the lucky ones that day. The ones who escaped with their lives.
All it took was a ride in a helicopter for Governor Bush to say he was completely blown away by what Mother Nature had done.
The tornado hits, and it's as if it sucked the life out of the ground.
To think it's going to be normal and non-existent would be, unfair to say. It's something we've had to deal with, and our kids have to deal with it.
The names on the memorial behind us, how many do you know?
All 27 of them. I get that Jarrell doesn't want to be known as like the tornado town, but I just don't want people to forget either, because a lot of people were affected, and like a lot of families, and they deserve to be remembered.
You can never forget the history and the roots of what made Jarrell before 1997, on May 27th, 1997, and I think as long as you never forget, then that means that Jarrell is still partially the same place that it should be, and maybe changes for the better.
As the first responders finish tending to you, you stand up, in pain, bloodied, but still alive. You look around at the neighborhood you once called home, gone reduced to nothing. The sun begins to set on this little Texas town, as the sky turns a vibrant orange, storm clouds still raging in the distance, the smell of death radiating through the air. You know you're lucky, but you still can't shake the feeling that somehow you just cheated death. At the gates of heaven, you somehow managed to return with your life. You know there's a long road to recovery ahead. It won't be easy, but nonetheless, you take one last look at your home and walk away. A dead man walking out of Jarrell. This has been Overcast. Thank you for watching.